Welcome to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. And now here's your host, Wade T. Lightheart.
What if you could double your energy naturally without caffeine or stimulants in just 3 short months? It's not only possible, you can transform every aspect of your health if you follow the 12-week blueprint we've created for you in the Awesome Health System. The Awesome Health System is a free course where you receive a daily video lesson spanning the most cutting-edge secrets for air, water, exercise, sunshine, optimizers, mindset, and education. It's something most companies would charge hundreds of dollars for, yet you get it for free when you go to bioptimizers.com. To access your course, register to download the PDF report called 3 Phases of Bioptimization, which gets you access to the report and daily access to the first lesson in the 12-week, 84-day Awesome Health course.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It's Wade T. Lightheart from Bioptimizers with another edition of the Awesome Health Podcast. And today we're going to talk about a topic that's really important to me. It's called flossing. And why is it important to me? I suck at flossing. I just went to the dentist the other day. He's like, "Are you going to floss?" And I said, "I know I should. Not going to happen." And he's like, "Maybe you should try a water pick." I'm like, "I'm open to anything. I just can't seem to get this thing right. I want to have good teeth. I know that there's a lot of health benefits. There's some historical aspects of why that's important that we learned today." And so good news is we have an expert on flossing and someone who has solved my flossing dilemma. Our guest today is going to talk about dental health. He's he knows some historical aspects, the archaeological aspects of teeth care throughout history. Might touch a little bit about that. But more importantly, we're going to talk about his solution to the flossing problem and what the potential benefit of that is long term. So without any further ado, let me introduce Eli Packouz, who is a serial inventor and 2-time founder. His first startup company, Singular Sound, he did with his brother in 2013. And since then, they have launched 8 blockbuster products. In 2017, he partnered with Dr. Ralph Raud, I'll have to get that right, and Dr. Ana Mascarenhas, I'm not sure if I got that one right either. My pronunciation is a little rough today. To create the first device that automatically flosses all your teeth in only 10 seconds. Man, this sounds like a great episode. InstaFloss. And after 5 years of research and development, InstaFloss is ready to change the world one tooth at a time. Welcome to the show. Great to have you on board.
Thank you. So glad to be here. Can't wait to get into it.
Okay. First off, I don't even know where to start. How did you get involved in the whole flossing story to begin with? Because since the first time I went to a dentist, it was the dental van parked outside of our elementary school. We called it the mental van. And it was a horrible place that we didn't want to go to. And they put this weird stuff on our teeth. It was probably some toxic chemical that they've far banned now in the last 20 years. But anyways, and they put these gels on us and they would give us these videos and they would tell us to floss. And I would brush my teeth regularly. I was no problem with that. But doggone it, the flossing part, I could never get down. And I've been struggling since I'm 5, for the last 45 years to somehow motivate myself to floss. It seems to take too much time. It's difficult. It's hard. I know it's important, but how did you get started on this whole flossing story?
I got started much in the same way that I feel is relevant to most people. I got started by experiencing the time-consuming pain of flossing. I was late for a meeting. I had eaten like a bunch of pineapple, and I was like, I got to get this stuff out. And it's like, there has to be a way we can do this better. Like, this is just taking forever. And I started, going on a journey, a deep dive, if you will, into everything about flossing. In terms of, when did it start? Does it do anything? What are the health benefits? Do people do it? If they do it, do they do it right? What are the results? What are we trying to accomplish with flossing, etc. So that has been a very long journey to get to where we are. But I find that my experience with that initial, like, man, I just don't want to do this right now, is actually way more common than I would think. So 70% of Americans, and Americans tend to outperform the rest of the world with these numbers, just to give you an idea of how bad it is, 70% of Americans regularly skip flossing, with 35% of them saying they almost never do it.
The other 28% lie about it, except the 2% who are associated with the medical health world.
That's very possible, but actually, sadly, I think the reality is even worse than that. So you get the people who don't floss because the reasons we ask them is that it takes too long, it hurts, it's hard to do, etc. Those are their top reasons for not flossing. And then you get the people who actually do floss. But when you look at the literature, it's actually incredibly disheartening, because if you divide people into two groups, one where you say, hey, you're part of a study, you need to floss every day by yourself, and then we're going to measure the changes. And then you have another group that says you're going to go to the dentist and the dentist is going to floss your teeth for you. And then you compare their results. And you compare their results against a third group that just didn't floss. The difference between the I flossed myself group and the not floss group is pretty small. Even if you go through all the effort of being like, you know what, I'm one of the 30%, I'm going to floss, unfortunately, statistically speaking, you're probably not doing a great job, which, is incredibly disheartening, because then it's this feedback loop where people are like, well, I did floss, then I went to the dentist, and the dentist is like, well, it doesn't look like you flossed. I'm like, why do something if you don't get results? Mm-hmm. So that is perhaps the next disheartening aspect of that. So when I set off to create a device to solve these problems, I knew I had to solve the reason why people don't floss in the first place, which is, primarily that it takes too long and that it's painful and that it's hard to do. But I also had to solve the element of you have to make sure that it is a proper floss, that you are getting the correct floss, because we can get a floss in 0 seconds if we don't care about the results by just not flossing.
I think that's the one I do, the 0-second floss strategy. It had 0 results, but it's fast.
Well, the good news is after 5 years of one wild ride of R&D that involved everything from over flossing myself before we got human subjects to flossing pigs, actually, and studying them, been quite a scientific journey. We can now do it for you in 10 seconds.
Wow, that's super exciting. Before we get into the solution, I want to know a little bit about the hits, because there's one of the being in the holistic health space and seeing all the different dietary strategies. And of course, then we have modern diets, and we hear about, tooth health. I think Weston Price brought up a long time ago about dental development relative to breathing. And he talked about the full wide smiles and bone structure of people in the West African continent who hadn't been exposed to modern food. And then the more modern food, the changing the dental side, and of course the impact of that. And of course the buildup of plaque and bacterial infections. And there's some longevity studies around how this bacteria actually puts an overload on top of the system, can lead to things like heart attacks and strokes and diseases and all sorts of plaquing items. Like plaque on our teeth is similar to plaque inside our body. And even as compelling as some of these stories are, it still doesn't seem to push the needle because of the convenience factor, or it's not clear. And then there's different dietary tribes out there who are saying, we are supposed to be hunter-gatherers, and we're supposed to be eating nothing but meat and berries. And another person says, well, no, we're only supposed to eat plants and not things because we don't have teeth that rip things open. And then there's other people says, no, we're supposed to have a mix of both. And then other people said, the hell with it all, I'm just going to eat Twinkies. Where are you on the history of and health benefits of tooth hygiene and where flossing comes in, maybe you can add some elements of understanding from your experience, because I know you've researched this a lot.
Right. So I would say that the historicity and the health benefits are two separate questions. Just because you've been doing something for a very long time doesn't necessarily mean that it's healthier. It often does, right? Like if this is your natural environment and your ancestors did something for 2 million years and evolved in a very specific set of circumstances, it is a very decent hypothesis to say, like, oh, they had lots of sunlight, we should probably get some sort of sunlight. It's a good place to start. It's a good supposition, but it's not necessarily true. Our ancestors cooked a lot of food on a campfire, which is incredibly carcinogenic. However, you don't need to live that long to pass on your genes. So, just because they've been doing it for long enough doesn't necessarily mean it's good for you. It could, and in many cases it does. So regarding flossing, the earliest evidence we have of flossing in the fossil record is actually 1.8 million years old.
Wow.
Yeah. Yes, this is far older than our species. To give you just like a general like glimpse of this, Homo sapiens have been around for 200,000 years roughly. I mean, there's no like strong demarcation because everybody's parent is not a different species than them. So you can't say at one point my mom was a Homo erectus and
right.
I'm a Homo heidelbergensis. No, that just at no point does that happen. It's definitely a spectrum. But roughly in the period when we have to classify things somehow. So we see people flossing hominids, really, flossing 1.8 million years ago. We could tell this because of the specific grooves in their teeth that are caused by plant matter in a scraping fashion. So they've been doing this for a very long time. And just to touch on what you were talking about, the teeth structures, which I would say probably doesn't directly have to do with flossing specifically, but hey, it is teeth and it is jaws and it is food, so it's all connected. Certainly after we started cooking reliably with fire, our teeth started getting smaller, our jaws started getting smaller, our guts started getting smaller because we didn't need to devote as much energy to digesting raw and fibrous material. And our brains started getting bigger as well. There's a lot of contention in the archaeological community as to like what caused it, and they're going to be arguing about this forever until they develop a time machine. But certainly it's correlated with the use of fire, and we see this shrinking. But what's interesting, which is to be expected, and it's a very slow evolutionary process. However, we see something that does not appear to be biological after agriculture. So after agriculture, there's a very strong difference in the quality of teeth we find in our specimens. And likely that's due to the increased carbohydrate and sugar consumption post-agriculture. Now, hunter-gatherer tribes, contrary to what some people believe, a lot of them do eat lots of sugar. Not all of them, to say that to address hunter-gatherer societies as a monolith is crazy. All
the different environments, if you're a hunter-gatherer in, the north of the 49th parallel is very different than on the savanna in Africa.
Exactly. There's the Inuit are surviving off of nothing but meats, whereas many other tribes majority vegetables. But what we see post-agriculture is a change in the primary consumption. So the primary food was all one type of, usually a cereal grain, rice, wheat, corn, etc. And due to the genetic modification by these humans, which GMOs are not a new thing. Humans have been genetically modifying their crops since before the agricultural revolution, just much slower. And we see the increase in the carbohydrate content of this. And so we see a slow decay of teeth. And we also see a change in teeth crowding. The latter part is actually a little bit contentious as to whether that's genetic in terms of if you're eating soft things, you don't need as big of a jaw, or whether that's behaviorally induced, that if you don't eat hard things, you don't develop the muscles to develop your jaw in a particular way. That is certainly being investigated, and I don't want to come down on one side or another. But certainly we see that societies that eat soft, mushy carbs and those that don't do have differences in their teeth. Now, to bring it back, the question is, just because humans have done something for so long doesn't necessarily mean that it is good. Like cooking your food on a campfire is incredibly carcinogenic. However, it will make you live and pass on your genes faster than if you didn't eat at all, or you ate uncooked meat, or something spoiled. I'd rather live to 60 than to 15. So if that's the choice. So, however, we do need to investigate, or we did need to investigate, still need to, whether the flossing that humans have been doing for the last 1.8 million years is actually doing anything. Is this just like a beautification habit? Is this aesthetic? So it turns out that actually it is incredibly important for your health. The primary way, I would say there's a number of ways in which this is important, but the primary way is that if you have a buildup of bacteria in your gums or underneath your gum line, your gums will become inflamed, and your entire cardiovascular system is interconnected. There is a good amount of evidence that inflammation can travel throughout the body via the bloodstream. So if you have inflammation in your mouth, it could stress your heart, it could stress other areas. And there's a lot of correlative data to show that oral health is certainly correlated with all sorts of diseases that are connected via inflammatory pathways. So heart disease, Alzheimer's, erectile dysfunction, which is a pulmonary issue, arthritis. All of these are correlated with poor oral health. And so the mouth is the open orifice to the world, and where you're going to be introduced to a lot of foreign bodies via your food, via your breathing, via all sorts of stuff. And taking care of the front line of defense, as it was, really seems to pay dividends down the line.
Fascinating. And so a lot of emphasis has been put on, flossing as part of your dental program. And anyone that goes to the dentist, that's on the questionnaire. And then people kind of go, well, whatever their level of compliance is. And we already established that 7 out of 10 aren't doing it. And the other 30% are oftentimes not doing it correctly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Through the different types of flossing that is available and what's the advantages and liabilities of each one, I think, before we get into your particular solution.
It's a great place to start, because honestly, that's where I started on this research project when we were trying to come up with a device. So if you look up flossing devices, on Amazon or whatever, you're probably going to find three really sort of, I'll get into the third one in a second. It doesn't really count. Categories of devices. You have string, which, could be made up of any number of materials, from waxed, unwaxed, to probably what hominids have been using for a while, leaves. I don't know if they sell that on Amazon though. And then you have a category of water flossers. And what water flossers do is they use a fast pulsating jet instead of string. And the third category, I would say, just avoid this entirely, unless you're a very special case, is air floss, which it uses like a pulse of air. Air flossing is not really effective. It is marginally better than doing nothing. So if you hate string and you hate water, I don't know, you have rabies or something, so you're hydrophobic. Well, yeah, I got bigger problems in that case.
You're not a string physicist. So.
Exactly. You don't understand the string theory of it all. and you're like, it's air floss or nothing, then okay, fine, do the air floss because it is better than nothing. However, I think we can do better, and most people want to do better than literally nothing. Actually, maybe that's not true given the 70% number, but we'll get back to that, which actually does tie into human behavior, which we'll get into after this. So the advantages and disadvantages of each is that, well, string is ubiquitous. It's easy to use. It's small. There's a lot of studies on it. We know it's effective. We know it helps. And the scraping motion can help remove plaque. Now, there have been about 50 years worth of studies on water flossing devices. The first prototype, I believe, was in the late 50s. It started hitting the market in the 60s. It only really became popular, I think, in the 80s. And even then, popular is perhaps a stretch of the word, comparatively popular to what it was. And so we've been doing research on this for over 50 years. And it's all available, and you can read it all. And it's actually fascinating that water at the correct pressure, at the correct pulsing rate, is actually more effective than string for a number of reasons. The water molecules are smaller than string molecules, so they could get deeper underneath the gum line. And not only can they get deeper underneath the gum line for any area, but your tooth is actually surrounded 360 degrees by your gums. It's like a post, like a flagpole in the ground or something, it surrounds. Pardon, what'd you say?
It's like a fence post.
Exactly, like a fence post. A fence post in the ground is surrounded entirely.
I used to have to actually drive fence posts and pull fence posts, so I'm very familiar with fence posts in my earlier incarnation working on a farm.
Then if we extend this analogy, it's just, you're just a couple steps away from being qualified to pull teeth.
Indeed, I grew up in the world where they still had some guys that used pliers, so.
Yeah. I mean, they still do use pliers as part of more tools than just pliers, I would hope, depending on where you are. But definitely, if you're going to a dentist in the United States and the only thing they have is pliers, you should run. So similar to a fence post in the ground, the gums surround the tooth a full 360 degrees. And the string can really get between the teeth. It can maybe wrap a little bit around in a C shape, but it has a very difficult time getting like right in front of the tooth and right behind the tooth where there's also gums. And so that's a whole area of bacteria and plaque that you, and potentially tartar, that you are not cleaning with string. So string actually misses a good chunk of the tooth. So water can get cleaned deeper. It can clean all the way 360 degrees around the tooth. It can remove more plaque, and it has better prognosis for reducing bleeding, for reducing gingivitis, and so on than string does. So, of course, this begs the question: if we've studied string or water flossing for 50 years and we see it has all these benefits, why doesn't everybody water floss? And well, it ties in very directly to the question of, well, why don't people floss at all with anything? And that is the fundamental flaw of water flossing devices, is that they take even longer than string to provide a floss. So you're taking the number one complaint people have, like, I don't want to do it, it takes too long, and you make it even longer. It is not surprising to me that you have not solved the pain point. Although they technically have solved the pain points, because water flossing is adjustable and therefore less painful than string, because string only comes on one setting.
But what are the time frames, incidentally? Like, how long do they estimate it takes to floss using string versus flossing using, say, one of these water devices, like a water pick or something like that?
And now for a Bioptimizers fixed digestion tip: supercharge your protein shake. Everyone knows protein shakes are a great way to sneak in extra protein, build more muscle, even replace meals and burn more fat. The problem is the highest quality protein typically absorbs at around 40%. One way to fix this and dramatically increase how quickly and effective your protein shake digests is to add 2 to 3 capsules of masszymes into your shake. One research study showed that pre-digested protein during a meal increased muscle growth significantly. To take advantage of this, just blend the open capsules into your shake, and within 15 minutes or less, the enzymes will have begun to break down the protein into amino acids. This can make your shakes at least 2 to 3 times more potent. Some people do this and sip on their shake while lifting to provide their muscles with a steady stream of amino acids during their workout. To save 10% on Masszymes, use the code SHAKE10, that's SHAKE10, at masszymes.com. That's SHAKE10 at masszymes.com.
Right. So usually you get 3 to 5 minutes as the average reported user time. Like when you actually time people, you say, look, do your thing. We're not going to actually we're not actually going to, tell you what to do. Right. They usually take 3 to 5 minutes, and usually in the string flossing is closer to 3, and the water flossing it's closer to 5. In the instructions, they tell you it doesn't take as much time; it takes less than that. And though you do get, it's like kind of bimodal. It's actually not it's not a bell curve. It's more like you see people in one of 2 categories. They're either doing it way too little or way too much. So you get the people on like the 5, sometimes a 7-minute, side of things. And then you get people in the 20 seconds and I'm done. And it's like, well, what did you do? And then it's like, probably.
You could probably you could correlate that with a psychology test and see, the degree of neuroticism with the level of compliance on flossing time. That would be an interesting study. Flossing times with that tendency for neuroticism.
If there are any grad students currently listening to this and you don't know what to do for your thesis, you could definitely steal that. And then
mental health outcomes in charge of that. So that would be an interesting psychological study, because there are impacts to bacteria infections and cognitive health. I do know that, as well as heart disease. So these are serious topics for making fun, but I do like to kind of break down the numbers so that people go, okay, yeah, it's this much time to do a floss, and it's more than that on the water. So how much was it be for the water?
Right, exactly. Sorry. I was including both. In that, and you get this bimodal distribution. Well, by that I mean you have people in like 2 separate categories. Like imagine 2 bell curves instead of just 1 bell curve. And you get that for both. There are people who, I water floss for 10 seconds, I string floss for 10 seconds, and the people who are like, well, I'm never done. And you see that both, and it is not a bad hypothesis to say that has something to do with neuroticism. I definitely don't know that explicitly offhand, but it's definitely a good supposition.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the big 5 personality types, because it really helps just mitigate conversations with a lot of people, with all my teams and my friends and stuff like that. Oh, okay, that's more important to them than, say, maybe to me. So I need to mitigate on how I look at conversations with various types of people, or how I interact, or what they value. If we could take a quick detour. Yeah, sure. I hope you don't mind. I mean, we're talking about distributions anyway, and we're talking about personality types. I find it to be incredibly useful, and not just useful, but actually more true, like more correlated with the actual data, to view these as spectrums rather than binaries. So, for example, introversion, extroversion is a spectrum. And a lot of people will say, I'm an introvert, and that's why I do X, Y, or Z, or I'm an extrovert, and that's why I do X, Y, or Z. But in reality, if you plot people's extroversion and introversion, you see a bell curve. And so the vast majority of people are actually right in the middle as, ambiverts. Sometimes they like being alone, sometimes they like being in friends. And we take what shows us as a bell curve that most people are in the middle, and we turn it into a binary, and we're like, are you an extrovert or are you an introvert? And what that does is it turns it into something false for 90% of people. So, and then there's a loss of authority on the subject and the reality and trust. And therefore, without that deviation or understanding of sigma distribution and the impact of that sigma distribution can have, like, for example, I think Jordan Peterson does a great job of illustrating, well, if you look at men and women, the tendency for aggression is, if you took 100 male, like 100 people, divide them up 50-50, males and females, 60% of the males would be more aggressive than the other 40, and 40% of the women would be more aggressive of a standard line. However, when you move it out to the ends of the distribution, is that all of the most violent people are males. And that's why you have a high amount of males in prisons relative to females. And so for quote unquote, the average person, and I hate that designation. First off, most of the data comes from sick people. And as a high performance guy and an optimizer, I'm always looking at, okay, who's producing the best result and what are the best habits that we can derive from that person? What is the outlier influence? Because outliers always find unique and effective ways to be able to produce extraordinary results with less effort, less time, less energy distribution for whatever reason. Culturally, they're a genius. They're very curious. They've exposed themselves to a lot of ideas. Who knows why they become an outlier? You don't know that. You just need to know, how do I incorporate the outlier behaviors to get a fantastic result? And I think if they would spend a little bit of time of explaining standard distribution of these ideas, we would get much better data and information than the talking points that have come across our news media channels for the last 50 years, which are really ambiguous and not very helpful. So thank you for diving into that and addressing that. I think it's really important. So continue.
No, I mean, I 100% agree. And to me, I think the best thing I've heard about averages is that the average human has one testicle and one ovary.
Oh, that's funny.
So I mean,
I don't know. Maybe they're populating at the time, so they're just half. They're splitting the onion in a different way. That's
definitely quite an image. So where were we? We were talking about distributions.
We were into the flossing water floss time issue, and you kind of illustrated that water may be superior because of the spherical aspects inside of gums and the coverage of gums over just flossing, which are great in between, but not so much in the fronts and the back. However, the time contingency is still an issue with both of those as far as compliance and efficacy.
Correct. In addition, one other thing that is a bit of a delta between efficacy and effectiveness, which is to say, how well the results you get when people follow the instructions perfectly versus the results you get in real life. Is that water flossing is most effective when the jets are at a 90-degree angle to the gum line. That's when you get this ricochet of splash that can go deepest underneath your gums. So that is very difficult for a human to do. It is very difficult for a human to do consistently, and it is especially difficult for a human to do on the inside of their mouth. And so that leads to these studies where you see producers of water flossing devices saying, like, look how effective our device is. It's like twice as effective as string, etc. And then you get all sorts of dentists being like, oh man, every time a guy comes in and he says that he water flosses, I just look at his mouth and I'm like, oh, this is terrible. Well, that's because there's a difference between efficacy and effectiveness. Most people aren't doing it correctly. It's also easy to miss areas. I mean, and this is true of string as well. And we've known this for some time, but it's also true of water flossing. So when it comes to this
is huge. Thank you for that. This is so important because so much we see this evidence-based so like narrative that's going out there. When you concoct a study, most people don't know how to determine a good study from a bad study. That's what separates a PhD from, say, a graduate student.
Sure.
A PhD understands how to determine and do a proper analysis on the efficacy of a study and then its potential correlations or causations. And then, but just because a study under a controlled environment that was done that way, is that replicatable in the real world? And almost never is it actually that way. So you're citing legitimate evidence that isn't applicable functionality.
Well, I mean, I think that it tells us the truth, but it tells us a very narrow band of truth. And that truth is, if we have jets in these areas at these angles, we can expect these results.
Correct.
The second study tells us that what do people do, right? And these are two different things, and we want to know both. The reason why we want to know both is because actually the former studies done under perfect conditions are actually super useful for, say, us when we're developing InstaFloss, and we want to create a machine that can do it for you. We want to know, what are the perfect conditions? What results can we expect to see under perfect conditions? And can we create InstaFloss to be able to deliver these perfect conditions? So that's why I would say that both studies are super important, but it's crucially important to be able to know what the studies are actually telling you.
Yes. This is brilliant. Great work. So now, introducing InstaFloss.
So our solution here was, we want to use water jets because they're more effective and they're more comfortable. However, we want to make sure that you never miss any area. It's always at a 90-degree angle, and that the floss is done as quickly as possible, so that way we can overcome the number one objective to flossing. So the first conception I actually had was a mouth guard. The issue with a mouth guard, though, is twofold. Number one, you would have to create a custom one for each person, which is very cumbersome and very expensive. The device would have to be like $900 if we were going to create custom mouth guards for people. And then we're solving it maybe only for the super rich. But the second problem with mouth guards is that the water would only be directed in between each tooth, and it wouldn't actually do that full 360 clean that we talked about. So we would make something stupid expensive for for far fewer results, which is just generally a bad trade-off. So the breakthrough conception actually came. This is like, gonna go a little nerdy. Thinking of taking an integral instead of trying to create one whole device, realizing that what we want to do one section at a time. So the device we came up with was an H-shaped device where the top part of the H goes over your top teeth, the bottom part of the H goes over the bottom teeth, and there's a swivel joint in the middle. Actually, have it right here. This is the mouthpiece. You see, it's an H-shaped device. The water comes through the front, and then it splits up the top H and the bottom H, and then we have 4 quadrants where the water comes at 90 degrees, and so and definitely watch that on video. If
you definitely want to watch that on video. Probably lost if you just listened to the audio where he actually put the device in his mouth and showed us exactly how it works.
And what that does is it has a cross section of the front and the back of the teeth simultaneously. So we're able to solve the time issue by attacking 4 quadrants of your mouth at once. And we're able to solve the coverage issue and the 90-degree angle by making the jets always at 90 degrees angles. And when you sweep it across your mouth, it provides 100% coverage. And what that means is that we could floss each tooth 4 times in 10 seconds.
Wow. This is incredible.
Yeah, I think so too.
No, it's really incredible because you've solved a dental problem that has existed since the beginning of humanity. And even before.
1.8 million years ago, that hominid was like, man, there's got to be a better way than leaves.
It took us 1.8 million years in the making. Here we have the InstaFloss device. Okay, so tell me more about the device. What's it made out of? How does it work? You kind of gave a brief demonstration, but like, do you hook it up to a garden hose? Do you hook it up to a thing? How does water actually get into it, and how does it work on your teeth?
So it's very similar to current water flossing devices, which is to say that there's a motor and a power source and then a reservoir of water. And the reservoir of water you fill up in the sink, you put it on the device, and then you take our device, which has this H-shaped tip. You put in your mouth, you turn it on, and you sweep your teeth, and in 10 seconds, you're done. If you are not following all of that, if you go to instafloss.com, you can see videos, you can see GIFs, you can see CGI breakdowns of what's going on inside. Because I understand that it's not necessarily intuitive, but if you're familiar with water flossers, just imagine we have 12 jets aimed at 90 degrees at 4 quadrants of your mouth simultaneously via an H-shaped manifold inside your mouth that sweeps across.
So it's like those 4-headed showers that you can go into in nice places, and it's like a totally different experience than your regular 1-headed shower.
That's not a bad analogy, especially if those showers have the ability to provide 100% coverage.
Yes, exactly. That is, and so next question, I guess, is, are these available? How do I get one? Because I want one now.
So I am in Guadalajara, Mexico right now. I rented a place really close by to the factory. After 5 years of R&D, we are finally in the manufacturing process. We have the molds are done. We're starting to produce these off the line. We should be shipping them soon, probably within a month or so after this publishes. If you go to instafloss.com, you can put in your order and we'll deliver to you as soon as they're ready and pretty soon.
Any other things that we need to know about flossing, the InstaFloss, and what do you foresee maybe as the potential health benefits of, and of course you can't make claims, I want to caveat that, but considering all of the contraindications and problems that have cultivated and developed out of not flossing, what do you think the net impact of something like this technology could be used on people who decide to take care of their teeth in this way?
That's a phenomenal question. And I would say the hardest part to answer that is because the way you phrased that question is quite quantitative. It'd be very difficult for me to say, well, if we get X% adoption, we can expect Y% fewer heart attacks. But it does appear that the number one reason people are not flossing is because it takes too long. And the number 2 reason is that it's painful. And the number 3 sad fact is that most people aren't doing it correctly. And with this device, we can solve all 3 of these problems. It's 10 seconds, it's painless, and it's done correctly. And so what I would like to see is that we can take a population that doesn't floss, and they can have all the health benefits you see from the studies that are done under laboratory conditions where the dentists are flossing them. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to bring the laboratory results to the public, because so far, if you read literature, there's this odd disconnect between the results we get in labs and the results we get at home. And I think that is a failure of technology.
Brilliant. I know that a lot of the longevity studies have indicated that good teeth hygiene can add 5 to 7 years to your potential lifespan. And so we can't say that that's going to happen from this, but it's a good indication that if you were to suffer the complications from not flossing, that this device would probably the simplest, fastest, and easiest way to eliminate that and give yourself a better shot at living longer, living stronger. Would that be accurate?
That would 100% be accurate. And the one thing I will add is also living richer, because the oral surgery is quite expensive. And if you don't take care of your teeth, you're in for quite a big bill eventually.
And then how much would one of these units go for? What's the life expectancy? Any potential maintenance aspects that are involved in a product like this?
So it is selling for $199 on instafloss.com. And we recommend that you replace the mouthpiece every 3 months, similar to your toothbrush head. And the reason for that is there's quite complicated channels that deliver the water at very specific pressures in various parts. Obviously, we don't want part of your gums receiving a different pressure than the other part of your gums and having an inconsistent result. But most, like 99.9% of people, are going to be using tap water for this, and tap water does have some level of hardness, and it varies by municipality. But we want to be able to guarantee that you are getting the floss that we designed for you, rather than a floss that could be compromised by hardness in the water. So we do recommend that you replace the mouthpiece. And if you do replace the mouthpiece, so far we've run over 1,000 cycles in the QC testing during the factory, and it still hasn't broken yet. I anticipate it could be much more. We're still running it to see when it will break, but I think it will, last you at least as long as a standard water flosser.
Super exciting. I just went to the dentist yesterday and we had a conversation about flossing, and I was at the dentist the week before and looking at this sort of thing and really looking at long-term solutions. And miraculously, you're on my podcast today. So I'm pumped and excited, and I am going on the order list today.
Fantastic. I look forward to getting your teeth flossed in 10 seconds.
Any other items that we should know about you, your company, InstaFloss, how people can get it, find out more, learn about the story behind your company and social media, where it's available, all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, we actually have a fairly extensive blog section on instafloss.com. Go to instafloss.com and you'll find it. We provide quite detailed open communication. We write at least once a month, sometimes more than that, where we talk about research, we talk about us, we talk about what we're doing. We've been incredibly open and transparent about the manufacturing process and all the hurdles that we've had to overcome. Almost no company does that. I don't know why, but the people who have pre-ordered seem to really like it. They want to know what's going on with their floss. And so we tell them.
I think that's great. I do believe that's very forward thinking. People do enjoy learning. The more you learn about how something's built, you get to see the genius in the thought behind it. It's obvious that you've put a great deal of thought capital as well as financial capital to develop this product and to develop this. And I'm delighted to share it with my audience and to tell people about it. I'm confident that a lot of people are going to get involved with that. And I suspect you'll be the next billionaire because you're solving a real legitimate problem for society. And I want to salute you and commend you for that. It's not easy to build a company. It's not easy to do manufacturing. It's not easy to engineer stuff. So kudos to you for going all the way and making a difference in the world. Thanks so much for joining us on the Awesome Health Podcast.
Thank you so much. I mean, I really appreciate that. Everybody has teeth. Everybody ought to floss. It appears that nobody wants to. And our hope is that with InstaFloss, they will.
Well, I'm sure they will. Thank you so much for joining us today. And for all our listeners at Bioptimizers, you can go to instafloss.com. Pre-order now. Get the message out. Get your kids on it, grandma on it, and you yourself on it. It will make a difference in your life. And of course, anything that improves your health, your longevity, and your vitality, I am all for. I'm your host, Wade T. Lightheart. This is Bioptimizers. If you like this podcast, put a thumbs up, share it with anyone and everyone that you can. I think this is going to be the smash hit. You heard it here first. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode.
And now for a Bioptimizers fixed digestion tip: how to get away with eating sugar. Hey, look, sugar is normally one of the worst things for you. But let's be honest. I mean, we all cheat from time to time. And here's a little trick that will ensure your body benefits from the sugar. Now, before you eat or drink anything sweet, take 5 to 8 capsules of P3OM. The patented strain in the formula devours sugar so fast it literally doubles in the body every 20 minutes in the presence of sugar. That doesn't mean that you can or you should eat a bunch of sugar or sit around all day doing that. But on the days that you do cheat, or you go after one of those maybe meals that you wouldn't normally do, this ensures that you get something in your gut that eats the sugar. And it's not going to feed the bad guys or spike your blood glucose nearly as much. So to learn more about P3OM and its sugar-devouring and protein-digesting properties and how it can transform your gut and metabolism, go to www.bioptimizers.com.
Thank you for listening to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. You can find more information at bioptimizers.com.